The coffee had gone cold again. Dr. Maya Chen stared at the ceramic mug, watching the faint wisps of steam that had long since dissipated, leaving only a dark, still surface that reflected the fluorescent lights overhead. She couldn't remember when she'd poured it. An hour ago? 3? Time had become something elastic in the laboratory, stretching and compressing in ways that had nothing to do with relativity and everything to do with obsession. The quantum displacement chamber hummed behind her, a low frequency that she felt more in her bones than heard with her ears. 16 months of work, 16 months of calculations, recalculations, failed tests and funding meetings where she'd had to simplify concepts that couldn't really be simplified. Parallel universes. The many worlds interpretation. The idea that every quantum decision split reality into branches, creating infinite versions of everything, everyone, every moment. Most physicists treated it as an interesting thought experiment. Maya had spent the last decade trying to prove it was real, and more importantly, trying to find a way to peek through the walls between those realities. "You're doing it again," said a voice behind her. Maya turned to see her research partner, Dr. James Rodriguez, standing in the doorway of the lab. He was holding 2 fresh cups of coffee, steam rising from both. His dark eyes were concerned behind his glasses, the kind of concern that came from 3 years of working together in close quarters, learning each other's patterns and tells. "Doing what?" Maya asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. "Staring into space. You've been standing there for 10 minutes. I watched you from the observation room." He crossed the lab and set one of the cups down beside her cold one. "You need to sleep, Maya." "We're so close, James. The resonance patterns from yesterday's test were nearly perfect. If I can just adjust the harmonic frequency by 0.03%, it'll still be here tomorrow," James interrupted gently. "And you'll be able to think more clearly after some rest. You've been here for 36 hours straight." Had it been that long? Maya glanced at her watch and was surprised to see it was nearly 3 in the morning. The laboratory was located in the basement of the university's physics building, deep enough that day and night became meaningless concepts. The only windows were the ones in the observation room, and those looked out onto the chamber itself. "One more calibration," Maya said. "Then I'll go home, I promise." James sighed, but he was smiling. "That's what you said 6 hours ago. But fine, one more. I'll stay and monitor." Maya felt a rush of gratitude. James didn't have to be here. This was her project, her obsession. He had his own research into quantum entanglement that was actually producing publishable results. But he'd believed in her work from the beginning, had helped her secure funding, had run countless simulations and checked her math when exhaustion made her eyes cross. She turned back to her workstation, pulling up the data from the previous test. The quantum displacement chamber was a marvel of engineering, even if no one else seemed to appreciate it yet. It was a sphere, roughly 3 meters in diameter, constructed from a lattice of superconducting wires that created a contained field where quantum states could be manipulated with unprecedented precision. Inside that field, Maya had been attempting to create what she called a reality resonance, essentially tuning the quantum frequency of the space inside the chamber to match the theoretical frequency of a parallel universe. If her calculations were correct, and if the many worlds interpretation was accurate, then somewhere out there was another chamber, another Maya, running the same experiment. And if she could get the frequencies to align perfectly, then for just a moment, information could pass between them. Proof, undeniable proof, that parallel universes existed. The implications were staggering. It would rewrite physics. It would answer fundamental questions about the nature of reality itself. And privately, in the part of her mind she didn't share with James or the funding committees, Maya wondered what it would be like to meet another version of herself, someone who had made different choices, someone who had perhaps chosen differently at key moments in her life. She pulled up the frequency modulation controls and began making minute adjustments. The chamber's hum changed pitch slightly, dropping into a lower register. On her screens, wavelength patterns danced and shifted. She was looking for a specific signature, a kind of quantum echo that would indicate successful resonance with another reality. Frequency delta, at 0.032. James called from the monitoring station, looking stable. Increasing amplitude by 5%, Maya replied, her fingers moving across the haptic interface. The chamber's hum grew louder, engaging the resonance protocol. This was the crucial moment. The resonance protocol involved creating a carefully timed series of quantum fluctuations within the chamber, essentially sending out a pulse that would in theory propagate across dimensional boundaries. If there was another universe tuned to the same frequency, if there was another Maya running this same test at this same moment, the pulse would reflect back, creating an interference pattern they could detect. The screens filled with data. Wavelengths spiked and crashed. Maya's heart raced as she watched the patterns form, her trained eye looking for the telltale signs of dimensional interference. There was something there, just at the edge of resolution, a shadow pattern that didn't quite match her predictions, but seemed to suggest, "Maya, the containment field is fluctuating,"
James said, his voice tight with concern.
"We're getting harmonic resonance outside the design parameters." Maya's eyes flicked to the containment readouts. He was right. The field was oscillating in ways it shouldn't be, as if it were responding to something outside the chamber. Impossible. The chamber was designed to be a closed system. "I'm seeing it," she said, "but the source doesn't make sense. It's like there's an external field interfacing with..." The lights flickered. Then everything happened at once. The chamber's hum rose to a shriek. The fluorescent lights overhead burst in a cascade of sparks and broken glass. Maya threw her hands up to protect her face, stumbling backward. She heard James shout something, heard equipment crashing. The darkness was absolute for a moment, and then emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. But something was wrong. The emergency lights were flickering too, pulsing in and out like a heartbeat, and in the darkness between pulses, Maya could swear she saw other things, other versions of the laboratory. One where the lights were still on, one where the chamber was a different color, one where she and James weren't alone, where other figures stood in the corners, watching. "James," she called out. "Are you okay?" "I'm here," his voice came back, but it sounded odd, distant, like he was speaking from very far away, or from behind a thick wall. "Maya, what's happening? The readings are impossible. We're getting quantum signatures from the chamber, but also from everywhere else, from the walls, from us." Maya's hands were shaking as she pulled up her tablet, desperately trying to access the system diagnostics. The screen glowed in the red emergency light, but the data made no sense. According to the sensors, the quantum displacement field hadn't stayed contained. It had expanded. It was still expanding, washing out from the chamber like ripples on a pond, and everywhere it touched, reality was becoming thin. "We need to shut it down," Maya said, moving toward the main power controls. But as she walked, something strange happened. She took a step forward, and for a moment saw herself still standing by the workstation. Another step, and she was in 2 places at once, 3 places, 4, each version of her slightly out of sync, making slightly different movements, reaching for slightly different things. She gasped and froze, and the multiple Mayas snapped back into one. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. "Did you see that?" she whispered. "See what?" James asked, and when Maya turned toward his voice, she saw something that made her blood run cold. There were 2 of him, not overlapping like her multiple selves had been, but distinct. 2 James Rodriguezes, standing side by side, looking at each other with identical expressions of shock and horror. "This isn't possible," one of them said. "We need to contain it," said the other, at exactly the same time, in exactly the same tone of voice. Maya's mind raced. The theory had always suggested that parallel universes existed, that every quantum event created a split, but they weren't supposed to be able to interact like this. The walls between realities were supposed to be absolute, impermeable. What had she done? She reached the power controls and slammed her hand down on the emergency shutdown. Nothing happened. The chamber continued to hum. The field continued to expand. The 2 James were still there, now both moving toward her, their faces illuminated in alternating flashes of red emergency light. "The shutdown isn't responding," Maya said, her voice cracking slightly. "The field is self-sustaining now. It's drawing power from the quantum fluctuations themselves." "Can we disrupt it?" asked one James. "Force a decoherence?" suggested the other. "If we collapse the quantum states all at once, it might create a feedback loop," Maya said, her mind working frantically through the possibilities. "But the energy release could be..." She didn't get to finish the sentence. The lights went out completely, even the emergency systems dying. In the absolute darkness, Maya felt a sensation like falling, like the floor had dropped away beneath her feet. She reached out blindly, and her hand touched something. A wall. But the texture was wrong. It was smoother than it should be, or rougher, or made of a different material entirely. She couldn't tell. And then the lights came back on. All at once, bright and steady. Maya blinked against the sudden illumination, her eyes adjusting. She was still in the laboratory. The chamber was still there, still humming. But everything was subtly different. The walls were painted a pale blue instead of the institutional beige she remembered. There were posters she didn't recognize, equations written on whiteboards in handwriting that wasn't hers, and James. There was only one of him now, but he was wearing different clothes, a red shirt instead of the blue one she remembered, and he was looking at her with an expression of confusion. "Maya? Are you okay? You just kind of zoned out there for a second." She stared at him. "What?" "The test," he said slowly, as if speaking to a child. "You were about to engage the resonance protocol. I asked if you were ready, and you just stopped and stared into space." Maya's mouth was dry. "The test hasn't happened yet?" Now James looked really concerned. "No, we were literally about to start it. Are you feeling all right? Should we postpone?" This wasn't right. The test had happened. The chamber had malfunctioned. The field had expanded. She remembered all of it with perfect clarity, but James was acting like none of it had occurred, and the laboratory looked different. And Maya turned and looked at the workstation. Her cold cup of coffee was there, the ceramic mug with the university logo, but next to it was the fresh cup James had brought her. Steam was rising from it. Hot, fresh. "What time is it?" she asked quietly. James checked his watch. "Just after midnight." "Why?" "Midnight." But it had been 3 in the morning when the experiment failed, when the field expanded, when reality started fracturing. Unless it hadn't, unless that was a different reality, a parallel universe where the test had gone wrong, and now she was here, in a universe where it hadn't happened yet, where she had the chance to prevent it from happening at all. But that didn't make sense. How could she remember events from another timeline? That wasn't how parallel universes were supposed to work. Each branch was separate, causally disconnected. There was no mechanism for memories to transfer. Unless the field had done something to her. Unless in that moment when the walls between realities had grown thin, something of her consciousness had slipped through, overriding or merging with her counterpart in this universe. "Maya, seriously, you're scaring me," James said, moving closer. "Should I call someone?" "No," Maya said quickly. Then more calmly, "No, I'm fine. I had a strange moment. Déjà vu maybe, or I've been working too long without sleep." "You were right about that." "So we should postpone the test?" Every instinct in her screamed yes. If she was right, if she had somehow retained memories from a parallel universe where the test had failed catastrophically, then running it again would be insane. But another part of her, the scientist part, needed to understand what had happened, needed to know if it was real or if she was just having some kind of mental break from exhaustion. "No," she heard herself say. "Let's run it. But let's add an additional failsafe. If the containment field shows any deviation beyond 0.01%, I want an automatic shutdown. Can you program that?" James looked relieved that she was acting normally again. "Sure, give me 5 minutes." While he worked, Maya stood very still and tried to sort through her memories. The failed test felt absolutely real. She could remember every detail. The lights exploding, the darkness, seeing multiple versions of herself, the 2 Jameses. But this timeline felt real too. She could remember the past 3 hours leading up to this moment. Remember James suggesting they order dinner around 9. Remember the conversation they'd had about quantum decoherence theory. 2 sets of memories, equally vivid, equally real. But that was impossible, wasn't it? "Okay, failsafe is programmed," James announced. "We're ready when you are." Maya took a deep breath and moved to the controls. Her hands were steadier than she expected. "Engaging resonance protocol," she said. "Mark." The chamber hummed. The frequencies aligned. Data began flowing across her screens, and Maya watched it with a strange sense of double vision. She knew what was about to happen. She'd seen it before. The harmonic resonance, the containment fluctuation. "The containment is holding steady," James reported. "No deviations." Frequency lock is solid. Maya blinked. That wasn't what had happened before. Before, the containment had failed immediately, but now the field was stable, perfect, exactly as she'd designed it to be. On her screens, the interference patterns were forming, clear and unmistakable. The shadow patterns she'd glimpsed in the other timeline were here too, but stronger, more defined. "James," she said softly. "I think we're getting something." He moved to stand beside her, his eyes widening as he saw the data. "Is that what I think it is?" "Quantum interference from an external source," Maya confirmed. "Not from our universe. From somewhere else. Another reality." They stood there in silence, watching the patterns dance across the screen. Proof. They'd actually done it. They'd detected a parallel universe. And then Maya saw something that made her stomach drop. Embedded in the interference pattern was information. Not random quantum noise, but structured data. A signal. And when she ran it through the decryption algorithm, it resolved into words. 3 words, repeating over and over. "Stop the test. Stop the test. Stop the test." Maya's hands were shaking again as she reached for the shutdown control. "James, we need to..." But she didn't get to finish. The lights flickered. The chamber's hum changed pitch, and Maya felt that falling sensation again, reality shifting beneath her feet like sand in an earthquake. When her vision cleared, she was somewhere else entirely. She was still in the laboratory, but not the laboratory. The chamber was there, but it was damaged. The superconducting lattice partially melted. The walls were covered in scorch marks, and standing in front of her, looking just as shocked as she felt, was another version of herself. The other Maya was older, or maybe just more tired. She had dark circles under her eyes, and there was a scar on her left cheek that Maya didn't have. She was wearing a lab coat stained with something that looked disturbingly like blood. "You got the message," the other Maya said. Her voice was hoarse, ragged, "but you ran the test anyway." Maya couldn't speak. She could only stare at this impossible thing, this other version of herself standing 3 feet away. The other Maya looked at her, with an expression that was equal parts pity and anger. "I know what you're thinking," the other Maya said. "You're wondering if this is real. If I'm real. If any of this is happening. Or if you've just had a psychotic break from exhaustion." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I asked myself the same questions, 3 years ago, when I first broke through." 3 years? Maya managed to whisper. 3 years since the first test. Since I opened the door between realities and couldn't close it again. Do you know what happens when the walls between universes start to break down? When quantum decoherence stops working properly, every version of you, every version of everyone, starts to bleed through. You get flashes of other lives, other choices. At first it's just glimpses, then it's more, then you can't tell which reality is yours anymore. The other Maya moved closer, and Maya instinctively stepped back. "There are protocols we've developed," the older version continued. "Ways to navigate the fractures, but the only way to stop it from spreading is to never start it in the first place. That's why I sent the message. I've sent it to dozens of other versions of myself, trying to prevent the cascade. But you all make the same choice. You all run the test." "Because we're scientists," Maya said, finding her voice. "Because we need to know." "I know," the other Maya said sadly. "Believe me, I know, but curiosity isn't worth the cost. Not for this." Behind the other Maya, the damaged chamber sparked and flickered. Through the warped lattice, Maya could see things moving. Shadows, shapes, other versions of the laboratory, overlapping and shifting like a broken kaleidoscope. "What did you do?" Maya asked. "How are you here?" "I'm not here. Not really. None of us are really anywhere anymore. We're between." The test created a cascade failure across multiple timelines. Each failure created another fracture. Now there are hundreds of realities all intersecting, all bleeding into each other, and we're stuck in the middle, jumping between them, trying to warn the others, trying to prevent more cascades. Maya felt sick. "How do I stop it? In my timeline, how do I..." "You can't," the other Maya interrupted. "Not once you've run the test. The cascade has already started. You'll jump soon to another reality, another version of the lab, then another, then another. Eventually you'll lose track of which one was originally yours. You'll meet other versions of yourself and of James and everyone you know. Some of them will be almost identical. Some will be so different you won't recognize them. There has to be a way to fix this, Maya insisted. To reverse the cascade. There is, the other Maya said. But you're not going to like it. Before she could explain, the lights flickered again. Maya felt that terrible falling sensation, worse this time, like she was tumbling through empty space. She tried to hold on to something, anything, but there was nothing to hold. Reality itself was fluid, slipping through her fingers like water. She landed hard on a floor. Her floor. The laboratory floor. But when she looked up, everything was different again. The chamber was intact, running smoothly. James was there, but there were two of him again. No, three, all looking at her with concern. Maya, what the hell just happened? One of them asked. You disappeared, literally vanished right in front of me. How long was I gone? Maya asked, pushing herself to her feet. The three Jameses looked at each other. Maybe 2 seconds? One said, you were there, then you weren't, then you were back. And you look, he hesitated, different. Your clothes changed, and you have a bruise on your arm that wasn't there before. Maya looked down at her arm and saw that he was right. There was a dark bruise just below her elbow, purple and painful to the touch. She didn't remember hitting anything, but then again, she was jumping between realities. Who knew what could have happened in a timeline she didn't remember? The test failed, she said. Or succeeded, depending on how you look at it. We opened a door to parallel universes, but we can't control it. The field is spreading, causing reality to fracture. I just met another version of myself. She told me there's a way to stop it, but I got pulled back before she could explain. The three Jameses were silent for a moment, processing this. Then they all started talking at once, their questions overlapping and contradicting each other. Maya held up a hand. One at a time. Please. I can barely think straight as it is. One of the Jameses stepped forward. He had a small scar above his left eyebrow that the others didn't have. Okay. First question. Are you sure this is real? That it's not just a hallucination or some kind of quantum measurement error? I'm not sure of anything, Maya admitted. But the bruise is real. The other Maya was real. Or as real as anything is anymore. And the fact that there are three of you suggests that the reality fractures are getting worse. How do we stop it? Asked one of the other Jameses. I don't know yet. But the other Maya said there was a way. I just need to find her again, or find another version of me who knows. And how do you do that? Asked the third James. If you're jumping randomly between realities, how can you control where you go? That was an excellent question, and Maya didn't have an answer. But even as she stood there, trying to think of a solution, she felt the pull starting again. The lights were flickering. Reality was getting ready to shift. It's happening again, she said. I'm going to jump. Wait, the scarred James said, grabbing her arm. Take this. He shoved a small device into her hand. It looked like a modified quantum sensor, the kind they use to measure entanglement. If you can keep this with you across jumps, we might be able to use it to track which realities you visit, maybe find a pattern. Maya clutched the device as the falling sensation began. The laboratory dissolved around her, and she was tumbling through darkness again. But this time she wasn't alone. She could feel something else in the darkness with her. Presences, other versions of herself, also jumping, also lost between realities. She landed in another laboratory. This one was flooded with water, ankle deep, and sparking electrical cables hung from the ceiling. The chamber was completely destroyed, nothing but twisted metal and broken glass. And standing in the water, looking at her with wild, desperate eyes, was yet another version of herself. This Maya was drenched, shivering, and she was holding what looked like a gun, not pointed at Maya, but held ready, as if she expected danger from somewhere. You're new, this Maya said. How many jumps? This is my third, Maya said cautiously, eyeing the gun. What happened here? Containment breach. Full quantum decoherence. This entire building, this entire city actually is a dead zone now. Multiple realities collapsed into each other. And the result is, well, you can see, nothing works right. Physics is optional. And there are things in the spaces between realities. Things that shouldn't exist. Things, Maya repeated. The wet Maya nodded grimly. People mostly. Versions of people who got caught in the fractures and couldn't find their way back. They're not quite right anymore. Merged wrong, or lost pieces of themselves, or gained pieces they shouldn't have. Some of them are hostile. Hence the gun. Maya looked down at the quantum sensor James had given her. The display was flickering, but it was showing something, coordinates maybe, or quantum signatures, different for each reality she'd visited. Do you know how to stop the cascade? Maya asked. I know the theory, the wet Maya said. You have to find the original breach point, the first test that failed, the one that started everything. Then you have to create an inverse field that collapses all the fractures back to that single point. It would, theoretically, reset everything back to before the cascade began. Theoretically. The problem is finding the original breach. Every reality that's been touched by the cascade has fragments of every other reality in it. It's like trying to find the first domino in a chain reaction after they've all already fallen. And even if you could find it, creating the inverse field would require more energy than any one universe can provide. You'd need to synchronize multiple versions of the chamber across multiple realities, all firing at exactly the same moment with exactly the same frequency. Maya's mind was racing. Multiple chambers, multiple realities, multiple versions of herself, all working together. It was insane, but it was also the kind of problem she'd spent her entire life learning how to solve. How many would we need? She asked. At least a dozen, probably more. The math gets complicated, and you'd need to be in communication with all of them, which means somehow maintaining coherence across reality jumps. Your consciousness is already fragmenting, isn't it? You're starting to have trouble remembering which timeline is which. Maya realized with a chill that the wet Maya was right. Her memories were becoming confused. She remembered the test failing, but also succeeding. She remembered James as one person, but also two, but also three. The quantum sensor in her hand felt familiar, but she couldn't quite remember when or how she'd gotten it. How long do I have? She asked quietly. Until you lose yourself completely? Hard to say. I've been jumping for what feels like weeks, but time doesn't work consistently between realities. Could be days. Could be hours. The wet Maya paused. That's why I stopped trying to fix it. I'm just surviving now, moving from reality to reality, staying ahead of the things that hunt in the spaces between. You should probably do the same. No, Maya said firmly. I started this. I need to finish it. The wet Maya laughed. A broken sound. You really think you can fix this? You don't even know which reality you came from originally. None of us do. We're all lost. But Maya was thinking about the quantum sensor, about patterns and coordinates. If each reality had a unique quantum signature, and if she could collect enough data points, maybe she could map the cascade, find the original breach. It would take time, and coordination, and luck, but it was possible. I need to keep jumping, Maya said. I need to find other versions of myself who are still fighting, who haven't given up. Good luck with that, the wet Maya said, but there was something in her eyes that looked almost like hope. If you find a way, if you figure out how to fix this, send a signal. Some of us are still listening. Maya nodded and then, deliberately this time, opened herself to the pull of the cascade. She let reality slip away, diving into the darkness between universes, searching for another version of herself, another piece of the puzzle. She jumped 6 times in rapid succession, landing in laboratories that were destroyed, abandoned, or simply wrong in ways that made her eyes hurt to look at. She met versions of herself who were paranoid, broken, transformed into things barely recognizable. But she also found a few who were still fighting, still trying to understand and fix the cascade. One Maya had developed a way to extend the duration of a jump, giving more time to gather information. Another had created a basic communication system using quantum entanglement, allowing different versions to leave messages for each other. A third had mapped 17 different realities and identified what might be the original breach point, though she couldn't be certain. Maya collected all of it, storing the information in the quantum sensor and in her own increasingly fractured memory. She met dozens of Jameses, some who remembered her, some who didn't, some who had become so lost in the cascade that they didn't even remember being human. She saw her laboratory transformed in countless ways, burned, frozen, overgrown with impossible plants, populated by machines, empty and abandoned for decades. And slowly, painfully, a plan began to form. The cascade had originated from a specific point in space and time, her laboratory, at the moment of the first failed test, but that reality no longer existed as a single discrete thing. It had fragmented into thousands of variations, each one slightly different, each one containing a piece of the original event. To reverse the cascade, she would need to bring all those pieces back together, to recreate the original moment with perfect precision, and then collapse it in on itself. It would require coordination on a massive scale. She would need to find at least 12 versions of herself, all willing to work together, all capable of operating their respective chambers simultaneously. They would need to synchronize across reality barriers, which should be impossible. But the cascade itself had proven that the impossible was just a matter of finding the right frequency. Maya jumped again, and again, and again. She lost count of how many realities she visited, how many versions of herself and James she encountered. Time became meaningless. She couldn't remember when she'd last eaten, or slept, or even stood still for more than a few minutes. Her body was covered in bruises and small cuts from rough landings. Her clothes had changed multiple times, picking up elements from each reality she passed through. But she was close. She could feel it. The quantum sensor was full of data now, patterns emerging from the chaos. She'd made contact with 11 other Mayas, all of whom understood the plan and were preparing their chambers. She just needed one more. One more to reach the critical mass necessary to generate the inverse field. She jumped into a laboratory that looked almost normal. The chamber was intact, the equipment was familiar, and standing by the workstation was a version of herself who looked fresh, alert, and completely unfamiliar with the cascade. "Who are you?" this Maya asked, backing away. "How did you get in here?" "I'm you," Maya said, and she was too tired to make it sound anything other than matter of fact. "From another reality. I need your help." This Maya was reaching for something, probably an alarm or phone. "This is impossible. You can't be me. You look like you've been through hell, and you just appeared out of nowhere." "The test," Maya said urgently. "The quantum displacement chamber. You were planning to run it, right? To try to detect parallel universes." This Maya froze, her hand hovering over the alarm button. "How do you know about that? That's classified research." "Because I'm you. I ran the test in my reality. It worked, but it also broke down the walls between universes. Now I'm stuck jumping between realities. And the only way to fix it is to coordinate with multiple versions of myself to create an inverse field that will collapse the cascade. I need your help. I need you to not run the test, but to prepare your chamber for a synchronized field generation. Can you do that?" This Maya stared at her for a long moment, and Maya could see the wheels turning behind her eyes, the skepticism warring with curiosity, with the part of her that had always been drawn to impossible problems. "Prove it," this Maya finally said. "Prove you're really me from another reality." Maya thought quickly. What could she say that would convince herself? "When you were 8 years old, you tried to build a time machine out of your mother's watch and a flashlight. It didn't work, obviously, but you convinced yourself that you'd traveled forward by 3 seconds because the watch was slow. Your mother was furious when she found out what you'd done to her watch, but your father laughed and bought you a book on quantum mechanics. That's when you knew you wanted to be a physicist." This Maya's eyes widened. "I've never told anyone that story. Not even James knows about it." "I know because it's my story too. It's all of our stories. Every version of you across every reality started the same way, made the same choices up to certain points, and then diverged based on different quantum outcomes. But we're all fundamentally the same person." This Maya slowly lowered her hand from the alarm button. "Okay, let's say I believe you. Let's say this is all real. What do you need me to do?" Relief washed over Maya. She'd found her 12th. "I need you to reconfigure your chamber to match these exact specifications," she said, pulling up the data on the quantum sensor. "And I need you to be ready to activate it at precisely the moment I send the signal. The timing has to be perfect across all 12 realities, synchronized to within a nanosecond. Can you do that?" "It's technically possible, but the synchronization mechanism would need to." This Maya stopped, her scientific mind already working through the problem. "Actually, if we use quantum entanglement as the timing mechanism, that would bypass the normal speed of light limitations." Yes, I can do this." "When?" I don't know yet, Maya admitted. I need to coordinate with the others, make sure everyone is ready, but soon, the cascade is accelerating. Every jump is getting harder, and I'm losing coherence. If we wait too long, I won't be able to hold myself together enough to manage the coordination. Losing coherence. What does that mean? Maya looked down at her hands. They were flickering slightly, becoming translucent at the edges, as if she were fading out of existence. It means my consciousness is fragmenting across too many realities. I'm spreading too thin. Eventually, there won't be enough of me left in any one reality to be functional. I'll just be scattered, pieces of a person across infinite universes. This Maya looked horrified. How long do you have? Hours, maybe. Possibly less. That's why we need to move fast. Maya felt another pull beginning. Reality getting ready to shift her again. I'm going to jump now. But I'll be back with the signal. Be ready. Wait, this Maya said. If this works, if we collapse the cascade back to the original breach point, what happens to you? To all the versions of you who are scattered across realities? Maya had thought about this question many times during her jumps. She'd run the calculations, examined the possibilities. Honestly, I don't know. Best case scenario, we all snap back to our original realities, and the cascade never happens. Worst case, we cease to exist entirely. The math is unclear on that point. You're willing to risk that? Risk potentially erasing yourself from existence? I don't see another choice, Maya said. If we don't stop the cascade, it's just going to keep spreading until every reality is touched by it.